When it comes to Canada on the world stage of international relations, it seems our government has been somewhat absent. We're going to explain why the feds have been silent on certain issues, plus how effective is the government's vetting policy. Well, we're going to dive into all of this right now with my guest, Brian Lilley of the Toronto Sun. Brian, welcome back. Great to have you on once again.
Good to be here.
Okay, so Brian, here we go. He resigned before he ever even started his job, but the question is, did he get paid? Who are we talking about? We're talking about Birzu Datani. He was appointed to head up the Canadian Human Rights Commission and oversee policing speech on the internet, but he resigned abruptly on Monday. So, Brian, what happened?
Well, this is a guy who clearly the government didn't vet properly in a very important position. Look, I disagree with the Online Harms Act because it's going to clamp down on free speech in this country and in a very dangerous way. But they've given responsibility for overseeing how that's done to the head of the Canadian Human Rights Commission, and that was going to be Birju Titani. This is a guy who it took people looking him up online mere minutes to find anti-Semitic comments in the past and questionable actions. And this is going to be the guy that determines human rights issues. That, as I said, polices speech online. It caused an uproar. The government tried to, downplay it for several days, a couple of weeks actually. Then they called for a third-party investigation. They hired an outside law firm that looks into reputation, that looks into people's backgrounds. They got that report and put Mr. Titani on leave. So he was supposed to start his job last week. And then they announced that he wasn't going to. He was on leave. We believe that he was paid while he was on leave. And then Monday, he abruptly resigns because the report the government got back was not good to him. In fact, it included a section on him not detailing a name he went by for a while, where he published and made some comments that were questionable at best, was Mujahid, which means follower, go for the way of Allah, basically a crusader for Allah. That, in and of itself was, should have been saying, okay, why did this guy that just converted to Islam take that name and then make comments that people considered anti-Semitic? And is he appropriate for this job? I think the clear answer is no. But so all of this comes out. Now we need to know, did he get paid just for the couple days that he was there, $900 a day, or is he getting his full six-figure salary? Is he getting it for a year, for 2 years? Is he getting it for his full 5-year term? These are questions we really need to know. But this is another example of the Trudeau government screwing up when they don't look into who they're appointing to positions.
Right. And Brian, this isn't the first time the Liberals have had problems with appointments either. So, does the government have trouble vetting people properly?
Oh, clearly, it's like they don't have the Google. I say it that way to make fun of them. It's Google, folks. Open up your web browser, punch in somebody's name, start reading what they've said, and then say, okay, well, what have they done, and look through it. We can look at someone like Laith Marouf, who was hired or given a grant for his organization to go out and teach broadcasters in this country, like Bridge City News, how not to be racist. Well, Laith Marouf has made some vile anti-Semitic comments. Um, I believe that you can say the man is racist based on the comments I've read and seen. That's how I would describe them. And you're going to teach broadcasters how to have an anti-racism strategy? That's insane. You look at someone like Julie Payette, the former governor general. She was appointed. It took journalists 45 minutes to find out that she'd been involved in a car accident where she was driving the vehicle and she ran over a blind woman. Now, she was found not at fault, but okay, that may be a red flag. Maybe you look into it. Government didn't know. She was involved in a domestic violence complaint. She was not the victim in that domestic violence complaint, where police in Maryland were called to her home. So can go through again and again, and this is a government that just sits around and says, "Hey, yeah, that person be good." Well, have you looked them up? Obviously, no, they don't.
Yeah, exactly. I think I'm going to go on the line on the Google there and look all of this up here, Brian. Okay, now, Brian, one person who clearly wasn't vetted properly is Ahmad El Didi. So he's the father in the father son duo arrested as part of a terrorist plot foiled by police. Now, this man was allegedly seen in a 2015 ISIS video. So, Brian, what is the Prime Minister saying about how this man was able to enter Canada and be granted citizenship?
Well, obviously, he's saying that his government is taking this very seriously, which tells you they're not. If they were taking it seriously, he would not have been allowed into the country. The allegation about the ISIS video was that he was mutilating a fellow human being who'd been, I don't know if they were tied to a cross or nailed to a cross. And you remember those ISIS videos, they would use crucifixion quite often. And he's doing unspeakable acts to this man. Um, how did he get into the country? Was he brought in as part of the Syrian refugee resettlement program? If so, clearly they weren't doing the vetting. We were trying to bring in people who were fleeing ISIS, Jeanette. We were bringing in people who were fleeing the terrorists. And it looks like maybe, well, we may have brought one of them in, which is horrific. We should have learned from the past because that's what we did with the Rwandan genocide. We brought in people fleeing the genocide and we brought people who committed the genocide with them and couldn't get rid of them once they were in this country. And now we've got Mr. El Didi now facing terrorism charges. Um, it's very disturbing. Pierre Poilievre has called the government out on it. The House of Commons has struck a committee to look into it. I think the government would be, it's going to come out that this is on them. They're trying to blame Stephen Harper, but it will come out that it's on them. If they're smart, they dump all this information out before the House of Commons comes back in a month's time. Otherwise, this is going to dominate question period and look very bad on the government.
Yeah, and the question is, how many more have they let in? This is just somebody, like one person that we know about. It's really scary. And of course, according to reports, the reason the plot was discovered by the police in the first place was a tip from an ally. So is this something that we should be concerned about or something normal?
A bit of both. It's normal for allies to provide tips to each other. It's obviously a sign that our security systems are not working properly. You know, they're focused on truck drivers in Ottawa, not on terror plots. That appears to be the problem. You know, we should always be thankful that we've got our Five Eyes partners. And you know, in talking to people, the assumption is that this was the Americans, but we haven't confirmed that yet. So it's not bad that they tipped us off. It's bad that that is continually how we are finding out things that are happening in our own country. That the Americans or the Brits or somebody else is informing us, hey, you should be looking into this. Do you have this person monitored? Because we think you should, and here's why. Obviously, police did their job once they were tipped off. They monitored the father-son duo. They arrested them at a hotel just north of Toronto when they were allegedly planning uh, the attack. Son says he has nothing to do with it, but they were arrested together in what was described as a plot against Toronto. Police would not explicitly say, but it's understood that it was aimed at Toronto's Jewish community.
Oh, scary stuff there. Okay, yeah, switching gears a little bit here. Qatar and Egypt this week said Hamas leaders wanted a ceasefire deal ahead of the critical summit happening this week. But now negotiations between Israel and Hamas are off the table after Hamas walked away from the deal. Now, there was a statement issued by U.S. President Joe Biden along with the leaders of Britain, France, Germany, Italy, but not Canada. So, Brian, why was Canada absent on this?
Because we're offside of our allies on this. You know, this isn't the first time. And the last time they tried to say, well, this is not a statement of the G7 or of NATO allies. This is a statement of the Quint. And I said, the Quint. I had to look it up. I covered Ottawa for years. I had to go and I talked to people who worked in foreign affairs. I talked to former foreign affairs ministers and said, have you ever seen statements from the Quint? They said, no, this is not a thing. This is just because Canada is being excluded. We've been making statements alongside Australia and New Zealand that go much further in criticizing Israel and not criticizing Hamas strongly enough. So we're on a different team than the Americans, the Brits, the French, the Germans, and the Italians. They're standing together. We're with the Australians and the New Zealanders, the Kiwis, off making our own noise that nobody's paying attention to, by the way. So this is, under the Trudeau government, we've been sidelined by our allies time and again because we're simply not taken seriously, or we've got a totally different position, which isn't a good place for us to be.
Also, not a good place for us to be. Canadians have been warned about being in the Middle East for some time now, but despite that, many Canadian citizens remain in Lebanon. So, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau issued a call for them to leave, saying if war does break out, it will be difficult to leave because he still admitted there is a government evacuation plan. So, why is this?
Yeah, if you're in Lebanon at this point, it is because you want to be there. And there are a lot of Canadian citizens who live in Lebanon. They don't live here. They, for whatever reason, took out Canadian citizenship and then went back to Lebanon. We saw that in the 2006 war, where we evacuated thousands and thousands of people at a huge cost. And within 6 months of the evacuation, almost all of them were back in Lebanon. So we shouldn't be devising an evacuation plan at this point. We devised an evacuation plan for people in the Palestinian territories and in Israel in the wake of October 7th, before the war fully broke out, but after the Hamas attacks, because that was a surprise attack. Hamas wasn't going around saying, we're launching an attack on this date. If you're a Canadian or another foreign national, you should get out. So we got people out in that position, and we've gotten people out of other war zones. Hezbollah, which is part of the Lebanese government and which controls vast swaths along Israel's northern border with Lebanon, they have been dropping rockets, thousands of rockets and missiles, very accurate, high level munitions into Israel. We saw that killing of more than 10 children on a soccer field a few weeks ago. And now there's talk of the war escalating. At this point, you should have been out of Lebanon. You've had plenty of opportunities. So if war breaks out now, we shouldn't be doing an evacuation plan for civilians. And yet the prime minister at a news conference on Monday admitted that it was there. They keep trying to downplay it every time that it comes out because they know it's controversial based on what happened the last time, but they appear basically hell bent on doing it.
Yeah, and I hate to say this, but who knows who they'll let in after what we've seen just happen, right? Okay, so Brian, the latest battle between Justin Trudeau and Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre is over tariffs on Chinese goods like steel, aluminum, and electric vehicles. So why are the two men who generally talk about the benefits of free trade now talking tariffs?
So there's a few reasons behind this. One is that the Americans brought in tariffs on Chinese goods, and they want us to follow suit. And being good NAFTA partners, and America is the one area that we don't want to annoy in our trading relationship, we should probably follow suit. But there's also the fact that, yeah, both men generally believe in free trade, so do I. But what we have with China is not free trade. China does not allow the same kind of access that we have. They subsidize their products and then dump them into our markets at below market prices. There's these new $12,000 US electric vehicles. Apparently, it costs about $25,000 to make them. Why are they selling them so cheap in the US? The Chinese government subsidizing them, trying to make sure that as governments push for an electric vehicle mandate, that people buy Chinese cars, and then China becomes the dominant player in electric vehicles. That's not something that we should be allowing to happen. And yet, that's what China is doing. They're trying to basically break up our manufacturing ability in North America, in Canada, and the United States. So we should be doing this. The Biden administration wants Trudeau to get on board. There's a split within Trudeau's government between Melanie Joly, the foreign affairs minister, who was just in China and who's been called on the carpet by China and told to behave. Canada better behave was basically the message we were given. And so she doesn't want the tariffs. Chrystia Freeland, the finance minister, apparently does. And so that battle is ongoing. And we know if Donald Trump gets in November in the American election, there's probably going to be bigger tariffs. So we should get on board with this. We should have far less access to our markets for cheap Chinese goods that are subsidized. And you only have free trade if you have a level playing field.
Yeah, and wasn't the federal government actually rewarding people for buying these Chinese EVs? I think they were giving out
Yeah,
rebates,
a
right?
subsidy given directly to the Chinese companies. It's a horrible idea, and even big backers of EVs in this country have said this is a horrible policy, and you have to stop it.
Wow. Brian, it looks like we're out of time here. Unfortunately, it goes so fast when I talk to you, but thanks so much for joining us once again today.
Thanks for having me.